Canine Detection Collaborative, a detection dog training trio with Stacy Barnett.
Hi.
Robin Grubel.
Hey there.
And Crystal Wing.
What's up?
With humor and a big dose of theory, our trio talks practical training advice and features interviews with top trainers and scientists. It's Canine Detection Collaborative.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Canine Detection Collaborative. My name is Robin Grubel, and I am here with Stacy Barnett.
Hey, how's it going?
And Crystal Wing.
How are you?
And we are going to do something a little bit different today because Stacy and Crystal did this fantastic interview with Holly Bushard. And unfortunately, the audio did not turn out super well because sometimes the internet gremlins do things to our computers. And so usually we do the interview with the person and then we do a follow-up episode of our reflections. But what we're going to do this time is we're actually going to play some clips, or we're going to have some clips of the interview with Holly. Well, you'll hear her break up a little bit occasionally. And then we're going to talk about those clips. And so it's going to be a little bit different, and I think everybody's going to enjoy it and have fun. So our first segment is coming up.
Tell us a little bit about your background, kind of.
Well, about 2 lifetimes ago, I was a police officer for a decade. And while I was doing that, I was a narcotics detection dog handler with a police department. And, you know, I really learned a lot from that experience, and it definitely colored and shaded my whole perspective in the sport. And it gave me a lot of tools and a lot of perspectives I wouldn't have had if I hadn't had that experience. But it has been a while. Back when I was a police officer, you still called into dispatch to get a license plate read. And so the world has continued to move as time has moved on. But one thing that happened for sure is when I started playing this game, it very much felt like a game. And it was easy to keep perspective that this was something I was sharing with my dog and not something that was so important that I had to go crazy about it. And it also gave me sort of an ideal picture in my head. Because I worked with great dogs when I was a police officer, I worked with a great dog, and my partners worked with great dogs. I had an expectation that my pet dogs should look fantastic too. And I always tried to create and recreate that ideal picture when I was playing with my pets. And I think the expectation that my dogs should search with the same type of commitment and vigor as the working dogs really helped me get the most out of my companion dogs and has informed my coaching style and my training style and my competition style. So I ended up borrowing an awful lot from that, certainly perspective and expectation. And it's been a real privilege. So I'm so grateful for having had that experience.
So what got you into Nosework originally? Like, how did you get started with this?
So I got started kicking and screaming. So for me, I was not interested in Nosework. I just wasn't. I just didn't want anything to do with it. And I had a student that started working with me, a student friend started working with me and was working on obedience. And she had an issue with barn hunt. And she decided that maybe I could help her with barn hunt. And I said, I don't do Nosework. I don't do barn hunt. And she said, well, if I bought you a class at the Fenzi Academy, would you watch it and help me with it? And I said, well, if you buy the class, I'll watch it and I'll see if I can help you. So she bought the class for me and changed the entire trajectory of my life.
Wow.
Wow. There was no turning back after that. And I started teaching it, coaching it, playing in it, and it sort of cannibalized my whole being. And so the start happened because a friend
wanted to find some rats.
wanted to find some rats. And we never did, by the way, resolve her rat problem. We just went with Nosework and switched sports and changed everything. So I'm super grateful for that start. I hope that we never lose the fact that this game is right for every dog, whether competition is or isn't. But I hope this is a fun activity for everybody and stays accessible to all and doesn't become accessible only to the teams that can be highly successful. Because I think ultimately this is a enrichment game and a debt we owe our dogs to let them play with the sense and the processing that is so natural to them. We owe them this. And so I hope that door stays open for everybody because it is just so good for them. And it is so good for how people feel about dogs when they ask their dog to do something that they themselves can't do. I think it builds relationship, respect, and trust in the otherness of the dog. I think it's pretty magical. And so I remain so grateful and hope the door stays open for everybody.
Well, those are really just really poignant. And I've known Holly quite some time now, and she really, what she was saying, that is her, right? That's who she is. And when she is working her dogs, or when she's judging, you always get that feeling that she really is there on the dog side. But what she says really just kind of, it just kind of strikes you, right? It's like, it makes you kind of reflect a little bit and kind of think about how we all got into this searching thing. What about you guys? What's your story? What's your story?
I had a terrible dog.
You had a terrible dog.
Terrible dog.
Why do you? Okay,
Con was supposed to be a protection dog, and instead he's a snippy dog. And I fought it and fought it and fought it. And then finally I embraced it. And then here I am. So, and he's a wonderful dog. It just took him 3 years before he showed me how great he could be. And I had to embrace him.
Well, and he was a terrific dog, just not in the game that you wanted to play.
No, he's pretty terrible.
Well, but he's, and so, my first dog was a border collie. I got because I was finishing up my MBA and I needed a new project. Because that's me. I needed another project. And I was going to do a little bit of search and rescue, a little bit of agility, and maybe I thought I'd think about flyball, but not really. And I got into search and rescue and haven't looked back. I think I took 2 agility lessons with him. And that's where I started. But that was the whole search and rescue crowd. And it was okay, Talon got me started in wilderness search and rescue. Moses got me started in FEMA level disaster work. And then a happenstance lunch with somebody else got me started in narcotics and explosives. And I just repurposed dogs.
Yeah.
Because Dash didn't have a job. And so he needed a job. So, yeah. And then, running into you, Stacy, has brought this whole Nosework thing. And working with Crystal, I'm like, oh my God, obedience can be fun. Who knew?
Who knew?
Who knew, right?
Yeah.
And play, especially, I just uploaded some videos today, which Crystal should be very proud of me. And the people at one of the stores I was training at pretty much probably thought I was crazy because I was playing with the puppies. So it's interesting to hear, Holly talk about how she took that work with her police dog and then expected the same level of fluency out of her pet dogs.
Yeah. And I know you haven't met Holly yet, but she searches with whippets. I mean, they're great dogs, but you don't think of a whippet when you think of detection work, right?
No,
so
I think of rabbits.
You think of rabbits? Oh, you think of rabbits when you think of whippets. I'm like, you think of rabbits
yes.
when you think of detection work? I'm like, no, it's a new one to me. I mean, I've heard they do rats. They're doing stuff with rats over in Africa, but I was like totally
right. No,
you blindsided me with the one with the
whippet.
Yeah, it was drug sniffing rabbits. Yeah. I mean, you don't think of them when you think of detection, but her whippets are awesome, right? She's also got a golden, but the whippets, I mean, you really that's tough. That's tough. And, to try to get that same level of competence, she had that picture in her head and was always striving for that, which kind of gets us to another idea. It's like, when we train, right, you always have that picture of what you're trying to strive for. I actually think, I'm just kind of going down a left turn, right? So kind of think about people who are, new to the sport or new to, searching, right? They may not have that picture in their head of what good looks like. That can be hard.
Right. It can be hard.
Yeah.
And with YouTube, everybody's an expert.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, YouTube and Facebook,
right?
Everybody's an expert. Yeah.
Right. And so it's sort of interesting because when you start thinking about, kind of what Holly was talking about, that fluency with the dogs that she now expects out of the Whippets.
Right.
It's kind of like the definition of a leader or what a good leader looks like. Everybody knows they can't really describe it.
Yeah.
But oh boy, they tell you what a good leader isn't.
Yeah. It's like, they'll
right?
know when they see it.
Right. And so, and then, it was interesting for me to hear her. She's like, well, I wasn't really interested. And so somebody went out and bought me a Fenzi class. Right. And I'm like,
that's what they're going to, I wonder what class it was, but yeah, absolutely.
Right. But all of a sudden, oh my God, talk about this whole, well, yeah, I can do that. And it's exciting. And she just walked through that door that just opened for her.
Right.
So that's very cool.
And it is cool, but it also kind of, I do kind of think about, we all are beginners at some point, right? We're
yes,
every one of us. It doesn't matter on how experienced you are a beginner at some point. And, I think back to actually going back and watching some of my early videos with Judd, right? What, he was my first Nosework dog, right? I kind of dabbled around with Joey. I hadn't really, but he was my first competition dog in Nosework. And I'm looking back at these NW3 videos from 2015 because we were able to buy them from the coffers of NACSW. And I'm watching the handling going, oh gosh, and I'm like, oh, quit crowding them. And, and then I realized, this one judge in the Northeast, he would always write, Sergio would always write on my, don't crowd your dog. And I was like, I'm not crowding my dog. But now I'm looking at these videos going, whoa, you're crowding your dog, right? And and then watching this, and of course, this unknown number, and, and I'm sitting here going, call finish, right? Because we don't have in our head when we're going through it the first time, we don't have in our head what we want it to look like. So we don't kind of have that guiding star, right?
Well, and it actually goes back to one of the previous episodes we were talking about. If you get a chance, go watch a trial.
Yeah.
Go watch a certification, go watch if you can, because there is an art to doing it. And
yeah.
Right. And watch, and just even one of the things that I find fascinating is being able to watch, even watching you when you came out here, watching you handle a 15-foot line on the end of powder. And I'm like, oh my God.
I didn't hit the dirt.
I know. But it was like trying to harness a free floating ion.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I don't have those mad leash handling skills right there. Wow.
She's like harnessing a missile, but
yes.
But I think you're right. You do have to be able to watch it, but at the same time, you have to be able to reflect, because right. I think we can see something that's really awesome, but if we don't have kind of the understanding of what we're looking at, it's really hard to put that into practice. Right.
Correct.
Yeah. Cause like if you're new, right, you don't necessarily I had in my mind, I'm not crowding my dog. Right. This was in my head. I'm like, I'm not crowding him. And I kept seeing, I don't know what he's talking about. He's always saying, you stop crowding your dog. And it just, I think you have to almost experience it to some extent. I don't and I guess my point is, I don't think there's a shortcut.
No, there absolutely isn't. And I think going with that, the expectation piece, I was teasing about my dog being terrible.
Oh, we know. We know that.
We know that.
know that. You know me and you know that I'm silly.
Yes.
And so I always felt that he wasn't the best working dog because I couldn't get his squirrels to line up. They were all in a rave in his brain, dancing around all the time until he was about 3.5. And then he also wasn't a good pet because he was on the roof of my house and on my cabinets and I'm not saying counters, but literally on my cabinets
and on the roof of your house.
And on the roof, yeah. So it just makes it to have a difficult time for relationship building and such when it's just corralling this craziness.
Yeah.
And those expectations are killer. And I think that's something that I really enjoyed about Holly's discussion is that she does talk a lot about her whippets and the expectations that she has of them. And she also kind of what Robin was speaking to about watching and learning from others. And so with the expectations that she set, even though she knew what she wanted from her detection dogs, she knew that it would be a different picture from her whippets. Yeah. And so I'd like to kind of play the next segment that she talked about from bringing in experience from her shelter work and obedience and kind of what Robin was saying, and then also about watching and then learning from those that you really admire. So here's Holly.
After I was done being a police officer, I worked in the shelter world and I was training dogs. And so I did obedience and agility and a ton of rally. And I had already had a lot of experience in those three sports when I came into the Nosework picture. So lots of dog experience along the way. So I judge for NECSW, which is so much fun and such a privilege. And I love the organization. And I love the dogs and I love the searches. It's such a wonderful, wonderful thing to get to spend time doing. I get to judge this weekend. I feel like I learned an awful lot watching 30 dogs run the same search or getting to watch the top dogs in the sport compete. You learn so much just getting to watch these fantastic dogs in these fabulous searches, just one dog after another. See how odor moves, see how handlers move, see where dogs hit. What an opportunity to learn. I cannot believe how fortunate I've been to have the privilege of being able to do that. The best thing to do would be to volunteer or go and attend some of these events and try them on for size. I've had some huge moments watching people and go, wow, I need some of that. That is incredible. And I've probably had more moments of going, oh my gosh, that is incredible than I have seeing mistakes. I've had some of my best memories are seeing handlers try some techniques and went, wow, that never occurred to me. That is incredible. When I get to judge, I get to see the CO's setups. And because I get to watch all the dogs in the run order, run them, I know the setup that I judge very well. So it gives me ideas for creative hide setting. And I also get ideas on some of the handling techniques that worked and didn't work. But the familiarity with the judge's setups, the CO's setups, when I get to watch that has been really useful. Was also fortunate enough early on to judge a summit trial before I ever did one. And so I had the opportunity to see those setups and to see some of the best handlers from the country perform and compete and watch how they handle and how much they interact and trade off leadership with the dogs. And that was really teaching too. So taking the best of what you see done and watching some of the really fantastic handlers out there and just watching some of those techniques and trying to mirror some of the interactions they have with their dogs has been huge.
So that was really interesting. I remember listening to this and really thinking about her comment around watching the interplay and change of leadership between the dog and the handler at that elite level of competition, and thinking about how often we have to have the conversation with handlers of, especially on our side, how soon do you step in and help? Because up until that point, the dog's driving the show.
Yep.
And I think that that's probably the same in Nosework, because I'm, watching you work the girls this summer. I'm like, oh yeah, the girls are driving.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And, a lot of, with Nosework, the sport is very dog driven. So keep in mind, our scent cones are huge. Odor is big, right? We get really, really big scent cones. So the dogs don't have to work super hard to get into odor, but they have to work really hard to problem solve the odor, right? So it is very dog driven. And, for most, I would say most training approaches takes a very dog driven approach, especially at the lower levels. Then as you start to move up the levels, you start to, the teamwork really becomes really important at that point, because now we start to work with unknown number of hides, and we have to make sure we clear the areas. So it's great if your dog can just say, yeah, I think I found all the hides, but what if they only covered part of the search area, right? So you have to be able to kind of play back and forth between you and the dog. And I think that is less complicated when you have more odor, like a lot of hides in the area. I think when you start to get into a situation where you have very few hides, that's where you're in danger of overhandling your dog, when the dog is basically moving through the area and maybe you don't trust that the dog has covered everything, right? So you're at risk of overhandling at that point. And I think there's also kind of that risk when the dog is in odor of inserting yourself too much, when the dog just needs to figure it out. So that's kind of what I see there is like, and I think people kind of run into some of the stumbling blocks in terms of kind of that back and forth at the higher levels, because that's where it's just more complicated.
So I was thinking about what Holly was saying around the fact that we all have to start somewhere. And I think about myself, right? Not only with the search and rescue, that was 20 years ago, so I can barely remember that far back. I feel old. But even more recently with the narcotics and explosive stuff, I didn't know what I didn't know until I didn't know what I didn't know. And I still don't know a lot. But you do have to start somewhere. And one of those things that I think we talk to a whole lot of people about is don't create a handler dependent dog.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to step in and help. Because what feels really good for us as the animal is seeing our dog be successful. And so that becomes reinforced. If we look at that as a reinforcer for the human end of the leash, then we have the tendency to want to step in.
Yep.
But I set up some problems today for the puppies. And who knew that searching over the top of all of the little packages of gloves in a hardware store would be highly difficult for 6-month-old lab puppies?
Yeah.
It was very hard for them. I think the amount of
toys,
it was the toy. Oh my gosh, I want to pick it up and I want to carry it with me.
Yeah.
All the way over to, you have the cloth gloves, you have the vinyl gloves, you've got the leather gloves, you've got all of this stuff. And plus people have touched them. And so the amount of discrimination they were actually having to do at this age was really difficult for them. And I literally said, okay, yeah, we're done, and walked away.
Yeah.
And moved my odor. Because at this point, I have hopefully learned enough that I'm like, throwing the towel on that problem. That was not good enough. The dog just thinks like, oh yeah, okay, we just did a blank search.
Right.
Because it didn't work right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. So maybe we need to redefine what success looks like. Because I think you're right. So humans, we think of success as the dog finds the hide, or the dog gets to be successful getting to the hide. But what we really need to be thinking of is success is the dog problem solves, right? The dog is successful on their own without our intervention.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because so one of the things that I had a hunting dog trainer field trial trainers say to me, what lesson are you teaching your dog today?
Yep.
And the important thing is for the lesson to be set up in such a fashion that the dog can solve it by themselves.
Yeah. As soon as we start to communicate with our body language, our dogs start to read us rather than working.
Yes.
And I see this a lot. It was actually very interesting. There's been a lot of discussion. I've gone through this with a couple of my classes where people they want their dogs to stay at the hide, right? While they go up to feed for some, it's not the way I teach it, but whatever. Right. But they want their dogs to stay at the hide. And they do this thing like they kind of pause if the dog comes off the hide. And then they move in and then they pause if the dog comes off the hide so that the dog kind of stays there. So it's almost reverse luring onto the hide, right? But the problem is when they do that, the dog starts to pay attention to them. And any kind of motion that they make towards the dog now starts to say, oh, you want me to alert here? And you get into this thing where you get into like a rhythm of the dog reading you and using you as information to find the hide, right? And as soon as we start to help the dog, it's the same thing. It's like the dog really starts to, they use us as information.
And we have to work so hard to read our dog. And it just seems like it comes so easy for them to read us. They just pick up every little thing we do. I'm so jealous of their observation skills.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure it's also their olfaction of smelling how we feel and everything else too. But I'm always in awe of how my dogs have picked up on so many minute little things. Just a slight turn of my shoulder, or everything is just so subtle and they get it. And when I think Yukon's not even paying attention to me and I just turn a little bit and he's, 500 feet away and he turns his body and starts coming my way, I'm just blown away by how observant our dogs are.
Yeah.
And you can use that. I mean, it's a great teaching tool because, I'm doing that with these. Because I need them to, I've set my hideout in a certain location. If they're not moving along, by just moving, I can get them to move to the search area where they need to be. But it is a very conscious effort on my part to do that, because I know, and how I know that they've learned it is if in the next repetition, they move on down the line without me having to move. I was just doing that today with the puppies at a store. And I'm like, okay, you get this one try. If it doesn't work in this one try, I then have to reset my problem. And I know, Stacy, you've done this, a couple of seminars on this, of hide placement to teach the lesson that you want the dog to learn.
Yep.
It's incredibly important.
The other thing I'm really big on, actually, that I've been kind of talking about a lot in classes, is that the dogs learn better if they make the choice. Right. So if they choose to do, like my head was going to single hide searches, why single hide searches are so powerful, right? If you set a single hide search, if you want that dog to really commit to odor, the worst thing you can do is to set a second hide out there.
Agreed.
Right. So instead of telling your dog, no, stick with this hide and keep going with it, all you have to do is set up one hide. And if they don't keep with it, well, that's self-correcting.
Right.
Right. So you get commitment to odor by just setting one hide. And the consequence is they don't get to find the hide.
You just did a blank search.
Yeah. Yeah. So if they don't stick with the hide, the consequence is you don't get your reinforcer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, you totally just got me all excited when you just said that dogs make the choices, because that's like the whole foundation of everything that I believe with play and obedience. And it's all the dogs making the choices and they're getting rewarded for those good choices. I mean, so ridiculous that I even for my seminar have a shirt that just says make great choices, because that's the whole thought of the entire day. It's the whole criteria for the entire day is to allow the dog to make the choice, because then you're putting the dog in control and they're learning what actually works and what actually pays for them.
Right. And to bring this back to kind of what Holly was saying with kind of that interplay between the handler and the leadership role, right, it's when we take too much of that, we're taking the dog's opportunity for education away.
Agreed.
And we're teaching them the wrong things at the same time. So it's kind of a double whammy. But
one of my favorite drills that I did with Yukon in the very beginning was I was down the bottom of this little rock quarry and looking up the hill. And I had my friend that was recording with the camera, and I was just looking up at her. And when she gave me a thumbs up, I knew to use my location specific marker, which meant for him to stay where he was. I would just say food. And then I turned around and I went over to him and I gave him food, and then we played ball. And so you were kind of talking about the reliance on the handler, but I had no idea what he was doing. I was just a body standing there, and he was just waiting for me to say the magical word. And then also the power of location specific markers, so when you said that the handlers, the movement of them. So, I mean, I have a word that means stay there. I'm bringing food to you, or stay there. I'm bringing a toy to you, or come over here and play with me. So those are also kind of powerful tools we can use. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I kind of, my mind was going in a different direction, kind of thinking about, so, we did an episode recently that is published on our post-certification and post-trial, right? And, with all this, we're kind of talking about, the dog really has to, be able to make a lot of these decisions. That's going to be so hard, Robin, like when you're doing like a double blind or something, right? Or literally you're going out and like you're doing your certification, you have to like say, okay, this is where my dog's alerting. You come back and go, oh, by the way, the second room in the chair, right?
Right.
So you don't even get that immediate feedback. That actually has to be really hard. And I wonder how, if that gives you, like doing that kind of exercise, if that gives you more confidence and being able to just really let your dog work without, quote, helping your dog.
It absolutely gives you more confidence, but it has to be done a time and in your training when you are testing.
Yeah.
Double blind testing is testing.
Right.
And right. So, and when I start doing double blind problems, I am not rewarding.
Right.
I'm not, if my dog throws their trained final response, my dog doesn't get reinforced. Why? Because that's the equivalent of being on deployment or out doing something. And okay, first of all, if it's a bomb and my dog alerts, I'm not throwing anything at a bomb. I'm not even clicking, right?
Right.
It actually
leaving.
becomes,
quietly.
It actually turns into, there's no pressure on the collar. There's nothing else. Good boy this way.
Yep.
And which I've conditioned in for him is actually okay, come with me and we'll go find another, because that's just how I've chosen to condition it. But the double blind problems, that's something that you do when you are maintaining operational readiness in my world. And like, we just got done with those certifications and those sorts of things. And somebody asked me, they're like, are you ready to go do some double blind problems? I'm like, no, I just did double blind problems. I have training issues that I saw in the certification that I just passed that I now want to go work on, which leads to, okay, I have skills-based training. I need to work diffuse hides.
Yep.
Because I saw a delay in his decision-making when it comes to diffuse hides. And so now I'm immediately flipping back into training mode. And guess what? I go back to known hides.
Yep.
Because I'm working on a specific skill set with my dog.
Yeah.
And I think we have the tendency to always continue to test.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Well, I want to see what happens when I do this. And I was like, oh, that's the bane of my existence.
Yeah. When I was teaching locally for a while, and I had a lot of people say, oh, I want to do a blind. I want to do a blind. Everybody wanted to do all the searches blind. And I got to the point where I'm like, well, the hide's over here. Like, I would just blurt out where the hide was, because I'm like, oh, I want you to know where the hides are. So I would just be like, well, the hide's under the chair. So I think people forget how valuable those known hides are, and that the blind hides are fun, right? We love to kind of test ourselves, but it's not really helping the dogs all that much.
Well, and the blind hides, this is probably its own whole episode, right?
Yeah.
But the blind hides are there for a confidence builder in the handler that they can trust their dog to not walk odor.
Exactly. It's not about building the capability of the dog.
Correct.
Right.
The known hides are about building the capability of the dog.
Right.
And so if we start thinking about, what lesson are you teaching your dog today? What's the skill that you're teaching your dog? That's the type of questions, when you train with me, the first thing, what thing are you working on today with your dog? And a deer in the headlights, like, what do you mean? We're just going to go find something? No, we just don't find stuff.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So I think that thinking about what Holly was saying about how getting to watch all of those dogs while she's judging and setting everything up and then watching 30 dogs run a hide. That's how you learn your scent theory. That's how you learn all of those things. I think about all of the hundreds and maybe thousands of dogs I've watched set out, I've set out certain problems. We just did area search certifications this past weekend here on the farm, and watching dogs from hundreds of yards away pick up odor and follow it in. It's just like,
that's so cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
Oh, I have to share one of the things that Holly shared about that as well. And she talks about from the detection dogs to nosework dogs and the difference in how odor works. So I think that'd be a good time to share her little clip now.
Nerves, I think, is big. And that misunderstanding of what the dog's capable of doing too. I have a profound memory of when I learned how far I could be from hides. I'd set up hides in my backyard, and I decided just to see how far away my dogs could be and still turn odor. And when my dogs were turning at 50 feet out, I really remember that moment going, wow, I've had this all wrong. Because I think possibly because I came from detection world where you did fairly tight presentations and you expected dogs to stay very close to the objects being searched because the odor profile was different than essential oils.
Yep.
I used to want to push my dog onto the car, or I wanted my dog to touch every container, or I wanted my dog to drag the perimeter no more than 12 inches off the perimeter. I did a lot of that. And then when I did that little game that one day where I decided to see how far could we be back and still make a turn, and I saw it was upwards of 50 feet, I went, yeah, I need to reevaluate how I handle, because I am making this harder than it is.
So that was really cool. And honestly, I love listening to Holly talk about when she realized like how far that odor was going. And it kind of brought me back to one of my most favorite training searches that I've ever done with Brava. And I have this on video, and I use this video a lot, like in my webinars and everything, because it's just so cool. There was this huge covered, it wasn't really pavilion. It was almost like a barn size, like an arena, right? It was a huge covered arena is really what it was. And we were out, I think it was one of the Fenzi sports camps. And I think it was in Pennsylvania. I don't know. They've all kind of run together. We haven't had one in a few years, but I was training there the day before. So I set a hide just for me, right? And it was up on one of the poles on this covered arena. And as Brava, and I started her probably several hundred yards away from that because I just wanted to see, when are you going to get into odor? And I wanted to work on clearing this area. And she got into odor at the corner of the arena, easily well over 100 feet away from the hide, like easily well over that, probably closer to about 150, 200 feet. And she gave me this change of behavior. And then I just let her out on this long line. And she literally was trotting with her nose in the air, showing me where, and she did like these exploratory pop-ups on a couple of the pillars. It's like, is it up there? Nope, it's not up there. Is it up there? Nope, it's not up there. And then tracing it all the way across the width of the arena. And you could just see her like triangulate. She goes up to the correct pillar and she's like, it's up here. And it was the coolest thing I think I've ever seen. It's just, it was like mind blowing. It was really mind blowing. And it just like, so when Holly talked about that, it just kind of brought me back to that search. Like I said, it's one of those things where you have to have it on video. And I do have it on video, which is really cool. So I can relive that as often as I want to, but it's just the coolest thing when you start to really see the dog paint that odor picture. Just how far away that odor goes. It just blows my mind.
So I hear you describe that, and I didn't realize until this actual exact moment that for me, that's how it automatically started. I've got a 12-week-old border collie puppy that from day one was searching out in the wilderness for a whole human.
Yeah.
That's a huge odor picture.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And one of the things that we even talk to students about now is, you start downwind and you start running a grid pattern, a sweep width pattern with your dog so that in these weather conditions with this type of ground cover and all of these things, how far away can you be and your dog will still pick up odor?
Yeah.
But, 90% of what we're doing, 95% of what we're doing, especially in search and rescue, is off leash.
Yeah.
Covering vast tracts of land, right? Or big, huge rubble piles or things like that. It's not a car.
Yeah. Like, do you think it's more like the mental leap is easier when you're thinking about vast areas than, let's say, if you're searching a room?
Oh,
because the reason why I ask this is I see this with a lot of newer handlers, especially like if I'm judging or something. And, let's say it's like a novice class or whatever. They want their dog, they're checking every object, right? In the search area. And I'm thinking it's like the mental leap is just really hard when you visually see objects and there's a hide on one of the objects. Hard to make that mental leap. But if you're like out in the middle of nowhere, it's almost like it's kind of like more of an obvious mental leap. Do you know what I mean?
Right. I actually think it was really interesting when I went to go do like my first bomb dog certification. The evaluator came down after we were done and looked at me and my friend. And he's like, you two are my FEMA level canine handlers, right? That are now coming over to start and do bomb dog work. And we're like, yeah. And they're like, you're not looking for people hiding behind big rocks. You're looking for small odor signatures. You have to search more detailed.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and said, I'm like, okay. It's taken me a couple of years to really understand the wisdom of that particular statement, because it actually has to do with how detailed the dog should search the room.
Right.
But, I also have the tendency to just turn the dog loose in the room and say, go find my odor. And, if it's sitting there long enough, he can find it. But if it's not presenting and he needs to stick his nose on a crack, he still needs to know how to do that too.
Yeah.
And so some of that comes about in the difference of the odors. And I would really have to think that with, and I don't know. So if I have a hide in a drawer and the drawer happens to seal really well, most likely, especially if it's a big cadaver odor, cadaver is going to come out. You can smell that stuff.
Yep. You can smell it outside the house, right? You have somebody in a house, you walk down the road.
You can smell it.
Yeah.
Bomb dog odor,
Not so much.
not so much.
Yeah.
Until you burp the drawer. And so I don't know, it may be that mental leap for the handlers that, they know visually that they're looking for a Q-tip. Right. So they think that they have to have their dog search like they're searching for the Q-tip with no odor on it.
Right.
Maybe that's the mental leap.
Right.
I'm outside looking for a full body. They're kind of stinky, whether they're alive or dead. They're stinky.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I do think, and I think that's one of the bigger hangups that people have in competition, right? As they start to move up the levels. And I see that kind of like, it's kind of this transition where like at the end of U2 level, we know how many hides there are, right? Because they tell us there's like, 2 hides in the exterior. There's 1 in this vehicle or whatever. We have five searches. Right. When we get it to the next level. This is also, there's also this break in AKC, but I'm just going to use NACSW because it's just easy to describe. At NW3, they give us a range, 0 to 3 hides. So you have to start to make this mental leap between, I know how many hides there are, to I don't. And what I see is that people have to do some mental gymnastics to try to reorient their brain so that it's not so much looking for hides.
It's clearing the area.
Clearing the area of odor. Yeah. And I think if your brain is still stuck on checking objects, you're not going to be successful.
You're going to run out of time.
Yeah, you're going to run out of time. Absolutely. And you're going to overwork the area. And with a lot of the dogs that we're working with on the sports side, you're going to have a lot of suggestible dogs, right? So you overwork an area, you're opening yourself up to false alerts.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I look at certifications is in the cadaver dog certifications for one of the Alliance for Emergency Response instructors and examiners, right? That I'm their head of their canine branch. Our cadaver dog, you have 0 to 2 hides in almost every single one of your areas. You really don't know how, there's up to 2 hides. If you hit 2 hides, you're done with that area. Yep. But depending on what your evaluators or examiners set out, you might have 1 hide in almost all your areas. So you know what? You continue to search.
Yeah.
It's a lot different. And then when you throw in a blank, and that you don't know where the blank's at.
Right. Yep.
And it's one of those things you learn to clear areas. And I've started mentally thinking about the fact that when I go out and search, it's my job to make sure that I have put my dog's nose in every place that it might need to run into odor.
Yep.
And it's my dog's job to, when it runs into odor, to follow it up and tell me.
Exactly.
And so, I have to be more than Uber, and they have to know their job, but then I have to trust that my dog will do its job.
Yep.
And so what that's probably done is lead me to call blank areas clear faster. Yep. And it was that mental shift that I had to start thinking about when I started, especially doing some of the bomb dog work. That mentality has helped me actually call blank areas blank more quickly than I ever have before. And for the bomb dogs to call a lot of areas blank, which is actually an acquired skill, in my opinion.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, especially if you're talking, with the explosives odor, right? Some of your scent cones are bigger, some of them are smaller, right? So what we deal with on the sports side, all of our scent cones are fairly large. So we know how far that odor could travel. Of course, that's going to vary depending upon whether or not you have like a contained and accessible, right? So it's going to be maybe sealed in the drawer or something like that. So you have to be aware of your search environment and whether or not there's opportunity for smaller scent cone development. But if you understand how the odor behaves and you have a trust in your dog that, you get your dog in the way of potential odor. You put those two things together, you can clear pretty quickly.
So one of the things I'm going to have to spend a little bit more time thinking about is, does the handler's perception of how they should search dictated by what they see as the size of odor being put out? So is a Q-tip going to require them to search more thoroughly? Or do they know that I'm putting out, a half a pound of odor, allow them to search more loosely?
Oh, absolutely. I think about this summer, and Yukon's my slow methodical dog. And then I had to ask, is this going to be a small source or a larger source? And you said it was larger. So then I really had to force him and myself to move much faster. And that was such a great training tip that you gave me, was just to move. And so then he started moving faster, and this slow methodical dog actually started to look like all the other dogs, who was going through the field and finding the large odor faster.
Yeah. I teach a concept of pacing, so that you try to pay attention to how quickly you're moving through the area, because I think we can slow our dogs down without thinking about it, right? It's like because we can kind of focus in on an area, and then we start to linger a little bit, and then we can get into some trouble. What's also interesting, you're talking about the size of the odor, like the source, right? So the other thing that I've also competed in with Brava is handler scent discrimination and AKC scent work. So there, I've trained Brava to look for my odor, which is hidden in the area, and it could be hidden on a Q-tip. We scent the Q-tip with our own odor, and then our odor is out there, and the dog has to find that and discriminate and not choose the judge's odor. And what I've noticed is that scent, it presents a lot smaller, right? The cone presents a lot smaller than, say, essential oil. So how I search in that context, I actually handle a little bit differently. So it kind of got me kind of thinking about how our perception of how the odor is going to behave, how that colors how we handle. It's fascinating.
And that's required.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think about the difference between how I handle the narcotics or the explosives dog versus the cadaver dog.
Right.
And, some of that is dictated by, you do have to, because your odor moves differently. But I also think that it helps us think seriously about getting out of our training rut. If we start thinking about, how do I run my cadaver dog more like a bomb dog?
Yeah. That also gets my mind going to odor threshold, right? So what we are perceiving as large and small source has to do with our ability to see what that source looks like. Like, oh, that looks like big source, or oh, that looks like small source. But how the dog reacts to it is going to depend on the dog's odor threshold. When I went over to Sweden, they don't search for essential oils. They search for hydrosols. So a hydrosol is essentially like rose water, right? So it's not a lot of essential oil. It's very, very little essential oil. And before I went over there, I'm like, oh my gosh, I pictured in my head that the dogs were going to have to really detail out the area to be able to find source, because there's so fewer molecules, right? How are they going to find it, right? This was going through my head. And when I went over there, I was so surprised, because their dogs searched just like my dogs. So here's my dogs on essential oil, searching the same way as their dogs on hydrosol. To me, that blew my mind, because where I had in my head the idea of small source, it wasn't, because it was an odor threshold issue.
And what your dogs do blows my mind, because I'm thinking they go into this area that's just filled with odor. And how in the world do they ever get to source when there's just, because I imagine like when I go to the mall in the perfume section,
Right.
it's so overwhelming. How would you
Right.
ever find the actual source? So in my brain, I'm thinking they actually have a little bit easier chance because it's not so overwhelming. That's what you do, I think, is just woof. Because I just imagine that perfume store.
Yeah, yeah, because it really can be very, how they can really drive into it when there really is a ton of odor. It goes back to like what really hooked us on this activity of searching, right? Because we were kind of talking about that. And honestly, for me, it's this like wonder, right? It's like, seriously, my dogs can do that? That's just incredible. It blows my mind every day. Every time I search with them, it just blows my mind. And it's just fascinating. It's just amazing.
And I don't know why, but I've been thinking about, listening to you guys talk too about the difference between the red dogs and the pink dogs.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And Robin, if you want to describe what that means.
Sure. Actually, I heard this, I believe it was from Deborah Burnett in Tennessee Task Force 1, talking about the fact that you have dogs that naturally have the propensity to either get really, really close to source, which are red dogs, or dogs who tend to be more readily able or willing to offer their trained final response when they are further away, so more diffuse odors. So those are pink dogs. So you have dogs on this red to pink spectrum, and you're always trying to bring the dog to one or other direction. So it's constantly a pendulum that you're working on. So when we start talking about my dog is being too pink today, or I'm working on my dog being more red, it's just a way for us as handlers who train together a lot to have a common nomenclature.
And that's what I'm dealing with my dogs, because currently I have a very red dog with Yukon, and he gets frustrated if he cannot get right to it and have his nose on it. And he will just keep going back and say, no, I need to get closer. And he'll go way out of the scent cone, clear himself out, and come at it from all different angles until he's just like, no, I guess this is as good as it gets. Whereas then I have Radish, who is, hey, where's my reward? I'm close enough. And so I'm really teaching her to get into that locate portion and push in closer. So it's really been fun having two dogs on opposite ends of that spectrum.
It is. And I have a very pink dog. Brava's very pink. And tonight she did something very red, and I was so proud of her. I had this setup. I was doing this for my class. I just wanted to do a demo video. And I had two areas, like I had kind of like two areas of clutter. I pulled in clutter from, other rooms. I created like piles, right? So I had like these two piles, and the one went into a corner and the other one was just up against the wall. And I put a hide that was accessible in the pile on the right. And I set a fan to blow that odor through that pile and through the air and into the second pile into the corner. And I asked her to search, and my pink dog would have alerted on the edge of that clutter, right? But no, she bracketed, right? She went back and forth, tried to go under, tried to go through, came back around and sourced that. And to me, that was like, yeah, we got a little red today. We got a little red today. I love that, that visual, and you shared that one with me, Robin, and I've been picturing that in my head, right? Trying to make Brava just a little bit more red, and trying to make, Powder just a little bit more pink. It's just kind of, it is really, really cool to just kind of, you're constantly trying to like swing them back into balance, and gosh, it's cool stuff.
So I'm looking at all of the things that Holly has shared, and I actually think we should probably do this in a second episode, because she has so many more things that we can kind of bounce off of. And I would like to talk next time about her whippets and the drills and the problem solving and the attitude that she trains in with their dogs. She talked about some predation stuff that might be really cool to kind of get into an episode. So I think this might be a good place to say our farewells and celebrate how inspiring Holly has been for us.
This has been great. Like I said, I've known Holly, quite some time now, and she never ceases to inspire, and she's just a genuine, wonderful human being with a whole lot of great ideas. And listening to the interview, or actually being there at the interview, I didn't just listen, right? I was there at the interview, right? And, but getting to listen to it afterwards, like together with you guys, it's just really kind of cool. It's just kind of getting in and kind of digging into some of the things, and it's just definitely a fun experience.
I totally agree, and I'm enjoying not only had I listened to it, but then going back and reviewing the clips has been really fascinating. And so I'm going to encourage everybody to go out to the website and make sure that you sign up for our freebies, because that's always one of the best ways that you can kind of keep tabs on what we're up to and what we're thinking. So we are now going to hit pause on this episode, and we'll pick up with Holly on the next one.
Thanks for listening.
Canine Detection Collaborative! We appreciate the time you spend with us. If you liked this episode, not only should you follow us so you don't miss the next one, but please also rate and review us in your favorite podcast app. For info on collaborating with us, go to k9detectioncollaborative.com. That's K9detectioncollaborative.com, where you can find our socials and pick up our latest monthly freebie. Join us again to talk training in the next episode.